You're listening to the What's Happening podcast with Gary Watts.
Good morning. I'm excited here to have Alex Marinelli with me this morning. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
Four-time All-American, four-time you won the Big Ten as a freshman. One of, 8 wrestlers in the history of Iowa?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to win it 4 times. I got the COVID year, so I went to college for 6 years. So my freshman year, I didn't end up winning it, but then got more years. So I won it the year that they canceled the Nationals, and then they gave guys like me another year, so I won it 4 times. But yeah.
So how'd you get the nickname the Bull?
Yeah, so
I gotta ask you that.
I started wrestling when I was 4 years old, and I met a well-known, nationally well-known wrestling coach named Jeff Jordan over there in Ohio. His brother's Jim Jordan, Congressman of Ohio.
Oh yeah.
Really well-known family in wrestling. Okay. And Jeff Jordan was the head coach of Graham High School over there. We've won state the past 23 years in a row. Won the national title my junior year. I started going to his club, Team Jordan, when I was probably around 6 or 7, and I wanted to evolve my wrestling. And sometimes you got to do that. You know, you're wrestling in local clubs, and you go to a well-known nationally ranked club, and your wrestling takes off. But I hit a double leg one practice, and Jeff Jordan's like, "That's the Raging Bull right there." So he calls me the Bull, and that's where I got the nickname. It was from a practice where I was really aggressive, and it just stuck on. And
at 6 years old.
Yeah, I was young. I kind of took on to wrestling at a really young age. I liked the aspect of it where it was like a one-on-one sport, a combat sport, and I love it. It's sometimes not fun, going through hard practices, but you look back on it and you're like, that was awesome. It's just a different sport. So
let me ask you this as a parent now. I know you have a daughter, 17 months?
Yeah, her name's Lillian Faith. Same middle name as my wife. She is the best kid. She's definitely stubborn like my wife and I. A lot of energy, and I can tell she's going to be a little athlete, but she's going to do something. Keeps me busy, and I'm blessed to have a beautiful daughter that is learning words every day. She's super smart, walking and talking. So, yep.
Well, you started. My question was, if you started when you were 4. As a parent now, is that too early? Just about right?
Yeah.
When do you start kids in wrestling?
I think you have to read your kid. I think each kid is different. Because we'll get into this in a little bit, but running a youth and high school club, you see kids that come in, and some of them are just too young, and then some of them may be younger than that kid, but they're more mature and they're developed a little bit different. So, I mean, you see that at 17 months. Some kids that were born on the same day as Lillian that I know of haven't walked in a little while. They just started walking, but Lillian was walking at 11 months old.
Wow.
And I think it's just unique to the kid, and you have to read them. You can't push them into it. They have to love it, but you want to introduce it to them because wrestling's such an awesome sport, and in Iowa City in general, you have so many great avenues to get better. I think it's individual.
So how do you know if they're athletic and you expose it to them? Mm-hmm. What are some things that you would tell parents to? I know you have the Hawkeye Wrestling Academy, right?
Yes, yeah.
What's the age groups of that? What
so the HWA, I started that I started a youth club a couple years ago. It was called the Iowa City Wrestling Club, and then I actually rebranded a couple this past year to be called the Hawkeye Wrestling Academy. So I ran it, all the way through licensing and everything, and we got approved to do it. And the HWA is the first foundation in Iowa City for youth wrestlers and youth and high school wrestlers. So it starts out, we have a group called the Mini Hawks that are 4 to 7 years old, and they train once a week. They're just getting a firm foundation, stand-ups, stance in motion, penetration steps, hand fighting, small things that kids can have fun with. And then when they, graduate into that intermediate group called the Mighty Hawks, they go 3 nights a week, and then my elite kids go 4 nights a week. So, there's a lot of avenues that you can go with youth clubs, but I think what's unique about ours is obviously we offer the different age groups, but we train out of the Carver Hawkeye Arena, the old room, and then the new room on Sunday nights, the Goschke Family Wrestling Training Center. So,
well, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So you can't start kids too early. It just depends on the kid, and you do a little bit of training with them, but you're getting them through the basics.
Yeah.
So can you tell? I mean, it's just like when I see a young kid, I can tell if they're going to be athletic or not when they're in grade school, like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, you
Yeah.
can kind of tell that kid's natural or they have a lot of ability. Can you see that in kids as wrestlers when they're really young, like
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7?
And I can see it like if they focus, if they're like actually listening and they're not all over the place. Now, there's some kids that just have attention, they're not paying attention as much,
Right.
but they have a knack for wrestling and they can take kids down. And I just think, you can sense if a kid loves it or he's just there because his parents want him to be there.
Right.
I think that's a big thing that, sometimes parents come up to me and they're like, "Hey, is he ready?" And I'm like, "He's ready, but he's got to get, for one, more comfortable. Maybe he's a little nervous. But two, like, he's got to be independent, as in like listening on his own and really like doing the moves and showing that he wants to do it." So I think as a parent, you want your kid to do something. Like my daughter, whether she wants to wrestle, play softball, soccer, whatever, she has to do something. So my wife, she didn't grow up doing athletics. Her brother and family wrestled, but she played or she did FFA, so pigs. So
Right.
she showed pigs in the fair. She was showman of showmen. She really cared about it. And pigs, honestly, I was talking with a former wrestler, Hawkeye wrestler, over the weekend. Pigs are sometimes harder than wrestling because you got to break them. You're doing
Right.
something and you're telling an animal what to do, but wrestling, you just do what you want to do.
Right.
So
Well, that's a neat. So tell us more about your journey. Let's get into that. So
Yep.
you started wrestling when you're 4, nicknamed the Bull when you're
Yep.
6.
Yep.
You're from Ohio. Why
Yep.
don't you take us through your journey as a young boy and then
Yeah.
as you became a University of Iowa wrestler?
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Miamisburg, Ohio. So it was around Dayton area. A very rich football program and just a good hometown. Their wrestling program wasn't as good as the place I went to for high school. So the place I went to for club and high school was an hour away from where I grew up. And, Miamisburg, Ohio I was always a football guy. Like I thought I was going to go to Ohio State and play football because I loved it. Honestly, I loved playing it more than I wrestled. And sometimes you'll see that is your football will complement your wrestling in both. So I did it
Mhm.
both, and I just kind of took off with both of them. But I grew up, I matured really early. I was this size in eighth grade. I was 164 pounds in eighth grade. So
Really?
yeah, I matured super early. And when that happens, you think you're going to go play college ball and be like AJ Hawk and James Laurinaitis and tackle guys as a
Right.
linebacker, but didn't get taller, didn't get any bigger, and stayed in that wrestling sport, in the sport of wrestling. And as an eighth grader, I decided to move essentially with a buddy. I kind of stayed with a family that kind of took me in and helped me because Graham High School, we trained 2 days, 2 practices a day. So we did 2 practices a day every day. After school, we'd practice, and then at night we'd come back and practice and drill and work on things. And so in eighth grade, I decided to go to Graham Junior High, and then in high school I went to Graham. So
Did you have to drive there? Did your folks take you there?
yeah, so my parents put on a lot of miles, did a lot of driving, and we went. Growing up, my dad and we went to national tournaments. Growing up, I tell parents this all the time. Like parents ask me, how do I not allow my kid to burn out? Like what do I do? And I'm like, well, first they have to love it. Like my goal was to have 100 matches a year. So that's a lot. Like when you think about wrestling, you only have so many matches a tournament. My dad was taking me to, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We were going to Georgia. We were going to California, Florida. I've been to a lot of states wrestling, and I'm blessed that my parents invested their time and money to go and take me to these tournaments. Sometimes I didn't do very well. Sometimes I went 0-2, and that happens. But it's a journey and a process that, I loved. And so yeah, I mean, I played 3 sports growing up. Baseball was one of them too. And I was just an active kid. I loved combat sports, but then also I love team sports because I had a lot of friends in them. So sports are a great thing, man. They'll teach you a lot of things, but then they'll allow you to create friendships and mentors that will last a lifetime. I mean, I've had a childhood friend in Ohio that called me the other day I met when I was 4 years old in wrestling. Like we were best friends right off the get go, and he called me, asked me how my daughter was doing, and we've been friends for 22 years. So
when did you make the switch more from football to wrestling? 8th grade, ninth grade?
yeah, I think I stopped playing football when I was a freshman in high school. So I played my freshman year. at Graham High School, and they weren't very good. And it's not a knock on them. They're just not a football school. We won like one game, and I was playing both ways, and I was getting hurt. My high school coach was like, "Listen, like you gotta like you're gonna get hopefully a scholarship for wrestling. You don't want to get hurt, and then something happens and you cost yourself." So I stopped playing, but really, I probably should have stopped in 8th grade once I moved and transitioned. But I love the sport, so I just went out to play Graham High School football.
What position?
Yeah, I was a running back and middle
Running
linebacker. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't very fast as I got to high school because guys are 6'2" sometimes in high school and they start getting faster. But as a middle linebacker, you kind of read and make plays on the ball, and I love doing that. So the typical wrestling middle linebacker aggressive position. So
Right.
yeah,
It helps in both sports, I think.
Oh my
wrestlers
gosh.
are the best football players.
yeah. I mean, look at
linemen.
Tristan Wirfs. I mean, his wrestling helped his football, and then Gable Steveson, that Minnesota heavyweight. He tried out for the NFL this year. Like how many people? Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
Austin Blythe. Like guys that wrestled. Linderbaum.
Yeah.
It helps them tackle. It helps them hold guys and move their feet, and they're just a step ahead most of the time.
So we're still in high school now. So
Yep.
let's talk about from once you started wrestling at 4,
Yep.
and maybe some of your football coaches, whoever, wrestling coaches. Tell me the impact that those coaches had on you, and just tell us some stories about your coaches, what they taught you, and
Yeah.
what they mean to you today.
Yeah, I think growing up as a youth your dad is your coach, right?
Okay.
So typically, like if he helps out with the Pee Wee program, he's typically your coach. My dad was definitely a dad that taught me how to work hard and gave me a regimen like lifting or doing something every day. He made it fun. He was hard at times, and he kind of navigated that because wrestling dads can often be like kind of crazy, and they're known to be that. But my dad was never that dad that yelled at me, or because I was the kid that didn't like that, so I kind of like shut down if he yelled at me. And you got to read your athletes, so he was kind of good about that. But
Did
then
he wrestle?
he wrestled a little bit, but I get my athleticism from my mom. My mom played softball. She's from Oklahoma, and she was from actually a big wrestler that wrestled for Oklahoma State, Dayton Fix. He grew up in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, and that's where my mom's from. And she played softball, was supposed to get a scholarship in college, but she hurt her shoulder. So I would say I got my athleticism from my mom,
Okay.
and my drive. I mean, my dad's driven too, but yeah, just an all around kind of sports family. Good genetics in that sense. But yeah, I mean, my youth grew up and then went to club at Team Jordan, and Jeff Jordan was very essential for my foundation, just how I am as a person, not just as a wrestler. Jeff Jordan's, biblically, not gifted, but rooted. He's rooted in his faith, and he's just technically sound, has very good at showing technique and honestly just relating to your athlete and storytelling. He can really, convey messages and just talk to people, and that's something that I try to bring up in my wrestling and my coaching is how to relate to kids, how to talk to them, because it's tough. If you have a really good wrestler, that doesn't mean he's a really good coach. And I think Jeff, honestly, he's more of a better coach than he was a wrestler, because his brother Jim was a 2-time national champ from Wisconsin, and Jeff ended up being a Big Ten champ, but he wasn't a national champ. And he was a national champion coach, but you sometimes see that. You sometimes see guys, they take the coaching role better than they did their own wrestling careers, and that happens, but Jeff was definitely essential for teaching me, how to say yes sir, no ma'am, or shake hands and look him in the eye and talk to him, and just he was always there for me. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about, as a coach and a wrestler, where does intensity come from? Can you teach that? How do you work on that? Because the few wrestlers I know are extremely intense. Football players are too.
Yeah.
If they're going to be good at it. Where does that come from?
Ooh, I think it comes from deep within you, and it comes from a sense of pride, like intensity and fight and grit and toughness, all kind of like, to me, is the same. And if it's not in you and your coach has to preach every day that that's an important standard that we're going to hold, and they can't waver on it. Like I see a lot of coaches, the fight they notice that the wrestler isn't fighting, and they kind of like are like, oh, whatever, like we'll just, they don't have it, but that doesn't mean they can't develop it, right? And so for me as a coach, I see a lot of wrestlers come in and they lay down on the mat, like the kid will snap them on their face and they'll let it go behind go, and that's just not a good attribute in life. Like if you have a situation in life where you're getting taken down, like it's figurative. Figuratively,
Right.
you're getting taken down. You're not going to willingly get taken down. You might make a mistake and stumble, but you got to fight through that adversity. And I think, if you're fighting and you give up a takedown, that's different than willingly giving it up.
Right.
So I think intensity, fight, grit, it's taught and preached every day, but some kids just have it, and you can see it. They have a sense of pride, and they don't want to get taken down. And then if they do get taken down, sometimes they don't deal with that the best. I mean, I just coached at a wrestling tournament this weekend in Des Moines, preseason nationals, and that's why my voice is kind of little gone right now. I was yelling at my kids, but some kids you see, like they fight more than others, and then some kids just kind of lay down and concede. We don't concede ever. Like you never concede in business. You never concede in anything. You always try to win. Now, winning and winning the right way is different, right? And I always tell that about HWA is we want to win and get our hand raised the right way. And you may say, what's the right way? The right way is your way, but with the right standards and morals, right? And so like you might do business different than I, but you won't be a shady businessman. You won't do business, the wrong way, like going against different things of business. You're always going to be well known to be a great business guy and in the community. But for me, like as a wrestler, I want to be a great dad, a great husband, a great friend and teammate, because I've seen wrestlers get their hand raised and they're just not great people. Like they're drinking on weekends, they're partying, and you can win, and that's what sucks. Sometimes you do the things right and you don't win. I mean, it's happened to me a lot of times. I've lost to guys that don't do things right, but it's always going to catch up to them. I mean, they're always going to be well known as that guy. And not as the guy that got their hand raised the right way.
So as a wrestler and as a young person or a young boy, and then growing into manhood, you're learning a lot of life skills, a lot of life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that Brands and Gable said about wrestling once you wrestled? Can you?
Yeah, once you wrestled, everything in life is easy. So
Yeah.
Dan Gable said that, very well-known national champion coach, multiple time. Tom kind of spends it as and says wrestling, once you've wrestled, everything in life is easier. He
Right.
kind of spins it and says that because like you're not going to have easy moments necessarily in life. Like it's everything in life takes work, and if you're not working at something, you're either being lazy or you're not striving for something. You're just kind of being complacent. So for me, like being a dad, it's not easy, but I've wrestled and I know how to take tough moments on. When your daughter's not sitting still when you're changing her diaper and she's rolling everywhere, you could get impatient. You could kind of get frustrated, and you got to take that. That's a prime example. It's very silly, but when she's throwing stuff, or how do you discipline? You get down on their level and you talk to them calmly, or you yelling at them? Like I'm not going to yell at my kids, my club kids. Why would I yell at my daughter like that? So little things like that.
So you've learned a lot of life lessons. So
Yeah.
So I imagine when you get into a situation, you can relate to a match.
Oh yeah.
Or I did this here and I stuck it out or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Or like, after the match, how much are you dwelling on it? And then,
right.
you look back and then you work on what you did wrong, and then you go tackle the next match. Because I've been in the Big Ten tournament, like I was saying at the beginning, like I was going in there, I was undefeated that year, went in there, ranked, seated pretty high, lost my second match because when you're seated 1 or 2, you have a bye that first match in the Big Ten tournament. So then my first match, I had a tough kid from Michigan and ended up losing in overtime. And the whole arena was on their feet cheering for that guy because an Iowa guy went down, big seed.
Right.
It was a big match. And then after that, I was sitting down on the wall, like just kind of, I don't really cry much, but I was getting emotional. And Tom Brands was like, you got to get up and you got to go. Like you have another match. And that's like life. You something happens. I'm not going to lay down for my family. I'm not going to go in a deep hole because that's not good for my kid. Yeah. And that's like in life, these guys, even dads that come up to me, hey, thank you for, your story, or thank you for whatever what has happened to you and overcoming it. Cause you know, they went in deep depression or holes, and you gotta, for one, pick yourself up and go. I call it pick up your cross and go. You know, that's a biblical principle. But also talk to people and get around people that want to build you up, because misery loves company. You know, if I'm miserable, typically I don't like to hear, you know, what I should do or what's good about situations, you know, and that's what Tom and Terry, they don't dwell on the past, and they're always positive, and they taught me a lot. So,
Well, you just can't lay around and feel sorry for yourself.
no, you can't.
Because you got to pick yourself up.
Yeah.
You got to move forward.
Yeah, you do.
It's good stuff. So,
Yeah.
so in high school, you're an Ohio State fan. You're from Ohio. You want to be an A.J. Hawk. You played for the Packers, right? And the Buckeyes.
Yeah, he did.
Great linebacker.
Oh yeah.
And
He's on the Pat McAfee show a lot.
yeah, I see that. He's good. By the way, he's great. So anyway, you go from high school, and now you're being recruited. You originally committed to Ohio State. Can you tell us that journey of that process of committing to Ohio State, coming to Iowa, and how things worked out for you. Just go through the college ranks now.
Yeah, I mean, so back in Ohio, I'm not patting myself on the back, but just I was a 4-time state champ in Ohio. So you when that happens, you know, you're getting recruited to multiple schools, and Ohio's a tough place to win it. It's not like you're winning it in Montana, you know, and not a knock on that. It's just Ohio and PA, and they're well known for wrestling. Yeah, I got recruited at a young age. I think I was like, and when I say recruited, there's rules to this, right? You can't be given a scholarship or whatever at a young age, like a freshman or sophomore, but I was being looked at. And when I got recruited the day that I could, Ohio State was very, you know, on me, and they offered, and then Iowa was too. And when that happened, you know, my family, different people in Ohio wanted me to stay in Ohio. Sure. And, you know, as a young kid, you know, you're 16, 17 years old, you're listening to a lot of people, and I have a heart that wants to please people. I don't like to let people down. I'm not really selfish in that sense. And sometimes I have to be. Like sometimes I get my eggs in too many baskets, and I help people out, and that's fine. But you got to take care of yourself first, and that's what I tell my kids is like when you're getting recruited, like a Bo Bassett, you know, you have to do what's best for you. And I think in that process, when Ohio State offered, my parents were like, "You're going to lose this scholarship. You're going to lose it. Like, what do you want? Like, what more do you want?" But I think what they didn't realize was that Iowa, and I conveyed this to them, what Iowa was the place for me, and it was my style. I love the coaches. I love the city of Iowa City, and they were really stuck on like Ohio State Buckeyes and being an hour away from home. Because Columbus was an hour away from Dayton, Ohio, and for them to just pop over and see me was a big deal. And as a parent, you know, I have a kid now, so I look back and I'm like, you don't want to lose your kid. But my wife's family, you know, my father-in-law, he went to Ohio State, so he's a Buckeye fan. And he kind of understood, you know, if Mariah Stickley doesn't want to go to Ohio State, that's okay. I got to let her go. And they kind of navigated a little bit different. So I've seen what not to do kind of in the recruiting process, and I've seen what to do. I've seen, you know, a dad that knows his kid might go somewhere else, and I'm talking about Mariah's brother, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, but he visited all kinds of schools. Like he went everywhere. His dad drove him everywhere to look at it, and where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? But he gave him his 2 cents on where he thought he should go, but Eli ultimately went where he wanted to go. And so for me, I committed to Ohio State, verbally committed, and I felt like other people were happier than I was. You know, they were like, "Oh, awesome, like Ohio State," and I'm like, "Yeah." You know, I just felt like the Hawkeyes, you know, I wanted to go there and wrestle for them. And then a month later, talked to my mom, and then she was like, "All right, let's go do it. Like, let's go change your." And I'm not a guy to go back on their word at all. Like if you say, "Hey, you know, you need to do this for me," and I'll do it. Like, you know, I'll stay true to my word. Verbally committed to Ohio State, and then, you know, went to Iowa City and told Tom I'm going to be a Hawkeye, and I had to let Tom Ryan know, you know, this is the situation. You know, and he understood. He's probably, coaches deal with that all the time. You know, family pressure, all this and that. But looking back now, I know my parents are like, you know, that was the place for him. So
who recruited you from Iowa? Did Tom?
It was Tom. It was Morningstar, Tom, and Terry. I mean, Morningstar. So what happened was, during the summer, my high school coach would run wrestling camps like all summer long. And as a high schooler at Graham High School, you would counsel those camps. So you would see kids all over the state wrestling every night at those camps. And Ryan Morningstar would come and check kids out because it was a chance to see high-level wrestling. And I would see him, shake his hand, say, "What's up?" And then he kind of would say, "I hope you become a Hawkeye." And this was at the time when he could recruit me. And then Tom came with Ryan Morningstar to see me when he could to recruit me. And it was an awesome feeling to get a Brands, coming to Graham, Ohio. It's just, and I was actually one of the first Graham wrestlers to go to Iowa, because Graham High School, we've had David Taylor, Olympic champion, Bo Jordan, Micah Jordan, Isaac Jordan, Ben Jordan, all these Jordan boys, and then Ryan Taylor, all these guys Zach Nybert, Matt Stevens, all these guys that went to Virginia Tech or Wisconsin and Pitt, Division I athletes, and I was kind of one of the first to go to Iowa. And then actually Mariah, my wife, has a cousin named Justin Stickley, and he went to Iowa with me as well. He's in the same year. So we kind of both went and wrestled for the Hawks. So it was kind of cool.
So that was the right decision.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a lot of pressure on you when you were a young man that, wait, Ohio State's right here an hour away.
It was tough. And I'm not saying it would have been necessarily a bad decision, because each one, and I've talked about this with a lot of my friends about career moves, each one may not be a bad decision, but you're doing what fulfills you and brings you, I guess, happiness and joy. And the Ohio State situation, they had Kyle Snyder, they had both. So each one had great wrestlers and great coaches, but where I wanted to go and where I thought would be best fit me and who I am was Iowa City. So,
well, that's a great story. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit for some of the folks that don't know you that you were 4-time All-American and 8 4-time Big Ten champion, posted a career record of 99-13. You were 25-1 in Carver Hawkeye Arena and 54-13 versus ranked opponents. 5-time Big Ten Wrestler of the Week. That's pretty amazing, man. I didn't quite remember that. I had to read that. But,
no, that's fine. It stinks that I lost in Carver and lost at all. I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
But I got beat for the first time at Carver, and then actually avenged that loss at the Big Ten tournament, and that's the year that they canceled the Nationals. So we were going to wrestle at the Minnesota Vikings Stadium that year at the national tournament. Like cool. It was going to be, it would have been awesome. Cool. But now I think it's set to wrestle in a couple years at that Minnesota. So they redid it. They're redoing it, which is awesome. But I didn't get that opportunity.
So tell me, as a wrestler, no matter who you are, what's it like coming out to Carver Hawkeye? Let's say you're wrestling Penn State, place is packed. What's that like mentally and emotionally to you when you come out?
I just get chills. It's something that you have to really not be prepared for, because I don't know if you can be, but you have to really channel your energy. Because if you get wrapped up and you start thinking this and that and you get too nervous, you start freezing up. You have to really and really when you shake hands with your opponent and get out there and the whistle blows, it kind of all fades.
Yeah.
You probably noticed that too. You have all these things that you have to deal with, but when you zone in on your work, it kind of all you kind of black out and you work. And that's kind of me. I love to get amped up, but if I get too amped up, I start over wrestling. Yeah, you make a mistake, you do something that you shouldn't do. No, it's awesome. The fans they're loud, they're passionate, they almost heckle too much the other crowd. I've heard stories of little crazy fans, but no, you love it. The fans are knowledgeable. They know when a takedown's a takedown. They know who Tom and Terry are. They're twins, so they're hard to tell apart. But you go to Penn State, they're yelling Terry at Tom, they're calling Terry, and they're twins, so I get it. But no, they're great fans. They're tough on you. You don't get what you want, you don't win. I've had instances where fans are pretty hard on you, and the fan or in the stands, and maybe he was drinking a little bit, but yeah, it's one of those things that is very memorable. It'll be a core memory forever. So
it's the best fans in the country.
It is. They are. Yeah, they're the best fans in the country and the world. I went to the Olympics this summer to watch Spencer, and we had about almost I'd say 80 to 100 fans that showed up for Spencer.
Really?
Paris.
Oh, that's great.
And that to ask all these guys and all these fans to go and fly over, and it's just they're great fans. They're great people. It's a good family.
Have you wrestled with Spencer? Do you guys work out together?
He's a lot smaller than me. Yeah. Like I want to say like 40 pounds, probably 45. But we can still drill. Like I know how to like kind of work with him and not put my weight onto him. But he's strong enough to even. I mean, he could turn me on top pretty easily. And I'm like talking freestyle, folk style. I kind of argue that he wouldn't turn me. But
tell us about what was your greatest match, or if you had so many great matches, I'm sure. But what would you, if you had to focus in on?
Yeah, I would say,
or some of the greatest, or if you had to isolate that,
I would say my sophomore year at the Big Ten tournament, I won in the finals, almost majored the number one kid in the country. I beat him by I think 7 points. Ended up taking him to his back, and then scored on him again and beat the guy from Penn State. That was a good match. And then there was one at Wisconsin. They were honoring Eli when Eli passed away in 2018, and it was a lot of nerves because you're honoring Eli. You want to win for him, right? And we had Believe everywhere. And I ended up being down, losing in the third period, and I wrestled a guy that I've always wrestled. He was a real tall kid, Evan Wick from Wisconsin, and he started beating me in the match, and he put in the legs on top, which he's known for being a leg wrestler, like a leg rider. And once that happens, he's hard to get out from because he's so long and tall. But I ended up reversing him, and I had to ride him to take it to overtime. And when that happens, you're holding on for dear life. You're so then it goes to overtime and ended up getting the takedown and winning. And it's just like, I mean, the crowd. And so what happened was after that match, I went over to the side of the mat, and they put a Believe, like a big decal on the mat. And I went over there and put my hands and slapped the mat. And they have this picture of me slapping Believe, and it like I blew it up and put it in my wife's office, and I gave her that and framed it, and it's just like a core memory that I'll always have. That Eli's family was there, we honored him. I came back in overtime and beat a rival that I've always had. So it was. Have
you ever had an experience on the mat where you kind of did some things where you didn't think you could do it? It's kind of like an out of body experience.
Yes, I would say that would be the one of them. Because or in the Big Ten finals, and I talk about it all the time. The time that happens, you are so not focused on the scoring, the time. You're just flowing. You're flowing, and that happens when you're driving. Right? You drive so many times, and you get somewhere, and you're like, "Holy crap! I wasn't really focused. I wasn't really focused." And people have that because you do it over and over.
Right.
But that happens in competition. Is like you go, you move. And I tell kids that wrestling is a sport like water. You have to be like flowing. You can't be stagnant. It can't be like a move. Like, what if he does this and this? You just go. Like, you just move. Your hands down, your feet moving. You take what comes to you. If he shoots, you score, like a Gable philosophy. If I shoot, I score.
Right.
So.
Right. Good. So let's get into the Eli story. A lot of people aren't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about your brother-in-law and what that meant to you and how that happened, and if you want to tell the story.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying I met my wife now in 2011. So we started dating back in 2011.
Where's she from?
She's from Urbana, Ohio.
So you're from your high school?
I'm from Miami's. Yeah, we're junior high sweethearts.
Junior high?
Yeah, we met when I was around in 7th, 8th grade. So I was in 7th grade. We met, started dating. And I messaged her when like Facebook was new because I saw her at a junior high wrestling tournament in the Graham section. And I knew all the Graham boys, but I didn't know she existed. And she was Eli's sister, so I knew Eli. And I got to know her, met her family, and we started dating after like the junior high state tournament. She became my girlfriend. And then we started dating, and my parents would her parents and my parents would drive halfway, and we would hang out for a day. And then we'd go back, and then we'd hang out for a day. And then finally, when we could drive, we would just drive to each other's houses. But started to get to know each other, and Eli became my brother. And he was super close to me, and we would do school together because her family was homeschooled their whole lives. And I went to public school. And then the moment I went to Graham, they had open enrollment where you could do an online academy where you could just get up, you do your school online, and they offer that with college classes and stuff. And it was super convenient because I could do my work, and then I could, if it wasn't wrestling season, I could stay home in Miamisburg, Ohio, But during wrestling season, I was typically doing school with them at their house. And I would hang out with them. Once we got done with school, Eli and I would go and do four-wheeling, and we would, make trails and all that stuff. Like, we would do everything.
Were you guys the same age?
So he was a year above me. So he,
Year older?
Yep, yeah, year older. So I'm 26. My wife is going to be 28 in July. She actually might be older than that. It's hard to keep track, but yeah, it's one of those things that Eli was such a unique individual where he didn't get mad at you. He held you accountable. He was just a good person to be around, and everybody says that about him. He was like your best friend the day you met him. I mean, his dad even said the first time I went to Mariah's house, he was so happy to see me, and his dad was like, "You would think the president was here." Like, and I'm just a normal kid. Like, I was just a kid, and he was like super happy to be around me. And fast forward to high school years. He wasn't a kid that won right away. He ended up being a state champion his junior year. But he always worked the hardest. And he like his freshman year, you would look at him and you like, he ain't wrestling in college. I mean, he could if he worked hard enough, and he did, and ended up getting a scholarship to wrestle at Wisconsin, and then went to Wisconsin. His cousin, Isaac Jordan, and the Jordan boys, a lot of them went to Wisconsin. So that's kind of where he wanted to go, and he liked the coach there. It sucked that he was away from me, but he wasn't too far. Wisconsin's not too far from here.
Right.
But yeah, in 2018, I had the idea of proposing to Mariah, and I wanted him here for that. And he happened to be in Ohio. And so him, his girlfriend, and then Mariah's mom and dad were driving separate they were together, but they were separate, coming up from Ohio to Iowa. And on the way there, Eli ended up either falling asleep or, veering off, and he overcorrected and ended up rolling his vehicle and passed away, and died and had a skull fracture. And looking back now, there's things that like I look back and I'm like, man, I should have called him like right then, like before it happened, to like wake him up. Like there's things that like I go through in my head that like he was coming for me, he was coming for what I wanted to do. So that's hard sometimes for me to live with, but Todd and Hope would never, or anybody would understand that like that things happen. And really, it was a tragedy, but how Mariah's family has dealt with this and how it's really, honestly, it's faith, and it's believing that he is in heaven and where he ultimately wanted to be, and he's called home because he was firm in his faith. He gave his testimony about 2 months before to a big group of people, and they have it on film. And a lot of times when you share your testimony, people don't have it on film. Like it just happens. Like you just share how you came to faith, how you believe in Christ, how you are saved, and then that's it. And then you just like testify to somebody. But Eli really was involved with Athletes in Action on campus at Wisconsin. He was just a devoted Christian that like you saw a different light in him. And a lot of people, Christianity, they're like, oh, like, I like your Jesus, but I don't like your Christians. I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians. And that's totally opposite with Eli. Like, everybody saw something different in him. And with him passing away, it was a celebration of life. It wasn't a funeral. It wasn't it was sad. I mean, he's 21 years old. But it was something that like it's just, you see people day in and day out go through these things, and they don't get through them the way that they probably should because of they don't have a firm foundation before something bad happens, right? The Bible says that the storm will come, and you have to build your house on the rock, not on sand, right? If something happens, or when something happens, when the storm comes, not if it will, So when it did, their foundation was firm. Obviously, they're going to get sad, they're going to mourn, they're going to grieve. That's all going to happen. We're all human. But they found joy in the suffering because of where he's at. I mean, I've had people that pass away that I've known that you don't know where they're going. Did they believe in the end? Like, did they come to Christ? And it's like, man, like that's what's tough is like, if you know how to get to heaven, like, and you don't share it with someone, to me, that's pretty selfish, like to me, or just like how to overcome adversity, because that tough times are going to come, but the suffering, it says in the Bible, is not compared to the glory that should be revealed to us in heaven. So like to me, we suffered, but the glory that we be revealed to us in heaven doesn't compare to that suffering, which is hard to like comprehend. Because in heaven we're going to be revealed like the glory of Jesus, or Jesus is going to have us in his home forever. Like, it's kind of hard to comprehend. So that's where faith comes in.
So when that happened, were you like a junior or senior?
I was I graduated high school in 2016. So I was in college for 2 years, I believe, two and a half. So, I've been here for 2.5 years. And then when it happened, Tom was right there beside me, the whole family at Iowa. And it's kind of crazy because we, the night that it happened, we all slept in Mariah's apartment because we were in the hospital for a long time. And Tom came over to Mariah's apartment and he woke me up and told me to get in the wrestling room. And he's like, you need to be where you need to not like freaking be down on yourself for too long. He's like, get in here, get a run in, clear your mind. And then after I ran, I remember going over to my trainer and just like hugging him, Jesse Donenworth. And like, cause like it was good. And looking back, that's what I should have done, because like, what am I going to do? Like, what are you going to do? Like, he's gone. Yeah, I'm going to be there for her family, but it's a 30-minute to an hour workout. They'll be all right. Like, I have Eli would want me to do that. Mm-hmm. And Tom said that. Eli's like, you have to win a national title. You don't have to be, loved by God, but right. You know what I mean? Like that, this is your goal. And, me dying is not going to stand in the way of that. And it's going to fuel you and it's going to motivate you. And I feel like he would say that to me. So
every match after he passed away, did you wrestle for Eli?
Yeah, I would say that I wrestled for him. I wrestled for the God above. I wrestled for my wife, my family, the fans. Yeah, I would say there was motivation there. And, yeah, I mean, he's such a selfless guy that he wouldn't even have wanted that Wisconsin, celebration.
Right.
He wouldn't have wanted that, but he deserves it because he's such a unique individual. I've met a lot of wrestlers growing up. I was 4 years old when I started wrestling, and he was definitely someone that like is different than most wrestlers, or if not all of them. And I have a cool story. So there was a wrestler that he wrestled, he beat in a Wisconsin dual meet against you and I, and that kid wrestled for Eli, put in his headgear, like inside his headgear, wrestling for Eli, a brother in Christ, a warrior on the mat, but a brother in Christ, or whatever. And he gave that headgear to Todd Stickley, Eli's dad, shortly after that season. And that was an enemy of Eli. Eli would go up after matches against a kid from Nebraska and want to get to know him and be like, hey, great match. Like, hey, tell me your story. Like, what are you about? Do you believe? Like, what? Because Eli knew that, like, this life is very short, and you go from 0 to 100 years, maybe you have, and most of those years are you're sleeping, and then the days that you're awake, you got to go and make disciples, because we go through this life, we want to attain and get goals. It's like we're doing nothing but freaking working. Like let's go out there and let's share the gospel, and he did that every day. So
he was part of FCA, Fellowship.
He was a part of Athletes in Action, AIA.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So FCA is more of the younger group, and then when you go to college, so at Iowa we have Athletes in Action, and then at Wisconsin they had one too. It's a college campus ministry, and he was a part of that. He actually, when he grew in his faith, he did a camp called the Ultimate Training Camp, UTC, and it's a camp where a ton of athletes from around the country come in and do this week-long workout where they're working out all day, and at the end of they do like a 24-hour workout where they don't have any sleep, but they're dependent on their faith in Christ, and they're finding strength in the Lord. And he did that, and he always wanted my wife and I to go, but ended up not working out because I had like tournaments or camps or something. But looking back, that's like something that he always told me that grew in his faith. So if anybody watching, like Ultimate Training Camp, if you're an athlete, I recommend it. I mean, I haven't been there, but
where is it?
They have different ones. They have one in Wisconsin, I believe. They have one in Minnesota. They have one in just different areas around the Midwest.
In 24 hours, you're wrestling, running, training.
You're doing it's not just wrestling. They're doing like everything. You're carrying logs on your back. You're you're for miles. You're doing like a plank. He was the winner of the plank workout. He did like a 21-minute plank. Like he was just a dude that was like determined. He worked hard. He wasn't the most gifted, but then he like matured into his body, and he was a 41, 49 pounder in college. And, you look at him when he was a freshman and you're like, there's no way this kid, but he just stayed with it. I mean, there was a story in high school where I was cutting weight as a wrestler. I didn't like to cut weight, and I was kind of a baby about it. But we were on the bikes and we were biking, and I was kind of feeling sorry for myself. And he goes, "Hey, Jesus died on the cross, and you're just cutting weight. Like this is nothing compared to what he went through. Like suck it up, kind of thing." And I was like, man, like for a senior in high school to tell me that, like, we were pretty young, and just a good story. Like it's something small, but he kind of puts it in perspective of what we go through every day. And it was nailed to a cross when he was perfect, not when he was sinful
Right.
and blameful. Like he and honestly, Jesus had, he was doing it for us. Like it was not just to just die on the cross. Like it was to save us from our sins. But Eli reminded me of that. It was pretty awesome.
So it also tells you a lot about the brands and Iowa Wrestling when it became a family. Eli passed away.
Yeah.
They were there with you. They went to the
flew
funeral.
my wife's family on a private jet, like a private plane, home. Because
Wow.
the last thing you want to do is drive home.
Right.
8 hours.
Right.
So he got a plane, didn't care what it cost, I assume, and then said, "Get on over there." And then I think I stayed for a little bit until the celebration, because we had camps and stuff going on, and I had a job, and they let me know when the celebration was, and then I went back to Ohio and flew home. But yeah, I mean, he gave me my time. And when I was in Ohio for a couple of weeks, I definitely gained too much weight because everybody's bringing over food to comfort you. And Tom kind of gives me a little bit a crap about it. But, it's one of those things that the family, if you know the Stickley family, like they're just, I call them the Brady Bunch, because they're such a tight-knit, well-rounded people that are rooted in their faith. And, it's a blessing to be a part of their family. It's a blessing. Like if it wasn't for wrestling, I wouldn't have met my wife. If it wasn't for wrestling, I wouldn't have met Eli. If it wasn't for wrestling, like wrestling is awesome. And I, someday I want to start a book, and I want to make one about my stories. And like, I want to make a book called The Wrestling Gospel. Like how has wrestling impacted your faith, and how has your faith impacted your wrestling? And like interview anybody, my pastor wrestled at Iowa, Brooks Simpson. Like, he came to Christ in college. In college, he thought, I'm saved. Yeah, I believe in God. Believing in God's not enough. Like, atheists, or not atheists, people believe in God. But is he the king of your life? Is he your savior? Right? And so, like, you pray to receive Christ. You all this stuff. And I think wrestling has put me around those people that have taught me that. I knew of God growing up. But did I necessarily know what it meant to be a Christ follower? I don't know. But for wrestling, if it not for wrestling, I probably wouldn't have gotten to that point, quicker than I had.
So now you're out of wrestling. You graduated from school. Now what are you doing?
Yeah, so I went to school for 6 years, got a master's in sport and rec management, which is awesome because, not many people can go to school for 6 years and not really, have anything to pay on. So I was blessed with a scholarship at Iowa, and got a master's degree with that because COVID, they gave us a year, and then I redshirted. So I had a decent amount of time in college. And I graduated, and I was like, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to coach? Do I want to compete? So there's two options. You can go in the workforce, or you can impact people, or you can further your wrestling in the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. It's the post-collegiate wrestling club that we raise money. It's a nonprofit organization that gives kids like me, young adults like me, like Spencer Lee, a chance to go and chase their dreams of being an Olympic champion. So, I had offers to go coach, and it was pulling me in this way. And I was like, man, this is a great offer to go coach somewhere. But Tom knew how important, for one, I was for the program, and then my wife, and he saw that I could still wrestle. Like I had it in me still. And you'll never lose that fire to compete. But, I was like, I'm going to compete still. So I competed, wrestled in various tournaments, went overseas, went to Poland, went to Nice, France, went to all these places that I got to see because of wrestling. And I'm super blessed and gifted for that. And I fast forward a little bit. I got a couple more offers in college, and it was kind of pulling me in different ways. And I was like, no, this is the place for me. And I wrestled at the Olympic trials qualifier, ended up qualifying for the Olympic trials, and that's in April. That was in April of this year. Didn't end up making the team. And then after I said that I'm going to retire from competing, but I'm getting into coaching. So that's where, obviously I want to coach here at Iowa someday. Who wouldn't? It's the best place to coach and wrestle. But what can I do? And a couple years ago, Tom said, "Hey, would you like to start a youth club in Iowa City, because we need one?" We've always had one, essentially. Like Terry Brands ran the Eastern Iowa Wrestling Club back in the day, and ended up going somewhere else, being under different leadership, and then here comes me. I start the Iowa City Wrestling Club a couple years ago while I was competing, which was kind of hard, and navigating that. And then this past year, when I retired from wrestling, I was like, you know what? We need to tie this to Hawkeye. Like, it needs to be Hawkeye Wrestling Academy. And so the HWA is when that was born. And yeah, it's been taken off ever since. We have almost 100 kids in my club. They're kids that want to do good, and they want to work. And that's what I tell them. Like, this isn't babysitting time. If I'm going to coach you, we're going to be better at the foundation stuff. We're going to teach you good moves, but we're also going to teach you life lessons. And I check grades. I mean, the parents got to send me their grades, and if they're slipping, I'm going to have a firm talk with them. And I won't necessarily suspend them from tournaments. I could. Sometimes kids travel and they get out of school. I missed school growing up. I would miss school for Tulsa Nationals. For California, you miss school on Thursday, you come back on Monday. And if kids have D's and F's, you can't, even C's, like, get that up. I strive to be on honor roll, strive to be on the dean's list. That's what I always did, 3.0 at least. So there's values and there's principles at the HWA that we won't compromise. It's an academy. This isn't just a normal local club. So
how many kids are in the academy? How many?
Yeah, so around 70 to 100. So it kind of fluctuates, and I'm not saying fluctuates like they drop out. Wrestling is different in a sense that some kids wrestle year round and some kids don't. So like wrestling, it's a winter and fall sport, or fall and winter sport, right? So September through July, we run our club. And most kids come in September. Some come in after football and cross country, right? And I'm fine with that. If you want to do different sports and you can't come all year round, that's up to you, man. Like, I'm not going to force you to come in the room. But if you want to be great at the sport, and if you want to be great at business, what are you going to do? Are you going to invest your time, or are you going to do, and you're going to dabble in different things? Now, I didn't wrestle all year round at 4 to 10 years old. Like, there's a point where I focused on 1 or 2 sports. So I get it. But the multiple groups helps. And then, dividing those 70 to 100 kids, because when you got a bunch of them in there, you got to have enough coaches to really help these kids. And that's where I put a lot of emphasis and thought into hiring great coaches. You build a team, you want to hire the best people. So I got myself, Colby Franklin, who was an Iowa wrestler. He ended up medically retiring because he hurt his neck. He wrestled in Pennsylvania. I got a lot of Pennsylvania coaches. Caleb Young, he's a 3-time All-American, one of my best friends. He was in my wedding. Great guy. He's a coach. Austin DeSanto, great coach. And I got a lot of parents that help. And then also, being in Iowa City, it's a blessing to have wrestlers that can come in and help out. So like a day like a Sunday night, if Spencer Lee wants to come in, he'll come in and help. You know what I mean? I'll pay him. Like it's a great atmosphere to get help, and to these kids they're training in the same facilities that he is. So it's like you see him training. Like on Sunday nights, they may come in and work out, and Drake Ayala's biking on the bike over there. And Ben Keeter's on the treadmill. Yeah. And it's just you're in awe. There's kids that come over all over the country that say, hey, they email me, hey, can we work out? I'm like, yeah, come in. And then they want to move to Iowa City. That's great. It's awesome. Yeah. It's awesome. It's great for the community. It's great for my coaches, because now they have to relate to kids. Because Austin DeSanto, myself, we're just so focused on us. But now we got to how do you coach these kids? And you got to relate to them.
As a wrestling coach, do you recommend other team sports when the kids are in high school?
Yeah, I recommend football.
Football.
I recommend any team sport, but what's going to complement your wrestling. So, if and you got to find what you want to do either at the next level if you're going to go to college, or are you going to just do it just to have fun? Because I can tell those kids that they're just doing football just to do it to be around their friends, and then it's like you got to make a decision. Like, what do you want to do? Like, you want to get better at this sport, because wrestling, man, it's if you don't do it. I mean, Tom says 12 months around the year, like you're not going to be where you want to be. Like this isn't a 5-month sport.
Right.
This isn't a 3-month sport. I mean, kids do that. I was little and you could do that at a young age, but when you get older, I mean, these kids they're bad dudes. Like you go in there, you're going to get penned in 30 seconds,
What keeps you up at night?
Ooh, I don't dwell on things that I can't control in the here and now. I think my wife, she struggles with that. Like, I'm not trying to expose her. I'm just saying there's times where she'll say, "Hey, I'm stressed about this." It's like, can you do it? Can you work on it now? No, it's like, okay, we'll wake up, we'll tackle it.
Right.
I'd say what keeps me up maybe is my losses in wrestling.
Really?
Oh yeah. I have bad dreams about them.
You still think about that?
Oh yeah. And you think about the moments what you could have done. If something would have changed a little bit, I would have been a national champion.
Mm.
I get worked up about it, and that's something that Terry Brands and Tom and my coaches, they help me through it, because it's a demon that I got to work through, or a bad memory. It's PTSD. It literally is. I mean, I've had dreams where I lose and, you're reliving that memory and you wake up and you're like, shoot, or
sweat. And
oh yeah. Or you can't find your mat, which that's a typical wrestling dream where you're called to the mat and you can't find it. You just can't find it. You're trying to get there. But I have thoughts, but that's not good for me. Put it behind you. I've lost the matches that I've lost at the national tournament were basically by a takedown, most of them, in overtime or at the end of the match. So if that takedown would have went my way, I put it in my mind okay, I would have had this guy in the finals and I would have been all right, or whatever. That's what keeps me up. It's not my job. I'm gonna tackle it every day. When I go and get home with my wife and kid, I focus on them. But when I'm laying in bed at night, I'm that's when you battle with your thoughts.
Yeah.
Everybody does it.
Everybody does.
Yeah, you have thoughts of the embarrassing times that you have, and you're like, why did I do that? Or it's just how you deal with them.
Right. So I usually finish the podcast with 3 things, and it's hero, highlights, and hardships.
Mm-hmm.
So who would you say your hero is?
It's easy. It's Jesus Christ, my hero.
Okay.
Now on this earth, I relate it back to, I would say, Todd Stickley, my wife's dad. And I could say my dad, and there's things that we're dealing with, obviously there's dysfunction growing up with me, and I've been through, my parents split up when I got to college, and there's things that I'm trying to break the cycle, and my dad's overcome. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that you go into and you don't know how to deal with things. I'm going to college. What are you doing? What are you resorting to? Right? Or my mom, she's dealt with a lot. But also, and then too, my wife. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of heroes in my life. There's a lot of people that have gone through things and overcome things. And, my wife has been steady through, hardship, through losses for me in matches, through, being a mom. I mean, she went through a hard birth. I mean, seeing, her being a mom it's a lot. I mean, she had a hard birth story, but, Lillian was healthy, but, when things don't happen the way you want to, and your wife's getting rolled back into the OR, just things that they have to take care of. It's shoot, man, is this really happening? And we pray and, we're firm in our faith, but when it happens to you, that's a whole different story.
Having a child's a miracle, isn't it?
It's incredible.
When you're in the room and it's incredible. It's just being born. It's just
it all happens so fast. She was born at.
Yeah.
My wife had a fast birth. I mean, she was born at 12:41 a.m. and then you have a pull all nighter and you're feeding her in the nursery or whatever, and your wife's getting taken care of, and it's a lot. It's awesome, and I think, people say, hey man, how's it being a dad? Does it change you? It's I don't think it ever changes my heart, but it impacts my heart for eternity in different ways. Like I'm not like maybe I'm a changed man, but you know, it's what she does. Like when she gives you hugs and like, you know, when you're you know, relaxing with her and you see her and you see her develop and then what your wife goes through and what birthing does to a body. Like it's just a lot. Like it's a lot. Moms are great.
Yeah, I mean, you know, until you see that, it's you got to give your mothers a hug.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
all wives that have babies. I mean, it's just
That's a lot.
it's a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's a
It's
lot.
amazing
And yeah,
what they do.
But yeah, and then the hero, and then what did you say was the
I was
other
going to say that hero and then your highlight. You got the highlight and then hardship. So what about, let's do a highlight.
highlight in my life?
Yep.
Ooh. I would say what I have overcome, and I'm not patting myself on the back, and then like who I am now because of it. Just overall, just like what I've gone through with recruiting, with the process with Eli, and then I mean maybe a highlight like I don't know how I scored my wife. like kept her. Like I'm not saying I was a
From
bad
junior high now to
we never broke up.
yeah.
Like
That's quite a story.
Yeah, and it wasn't. There's ups and downs through relationships and things happen, but yeah, we were always faithful, both her and I, and you know, she helped. I mean, when I met her, her Bible was falling apart, and that's typically a good thing. You know, if your Bible is really, really like not, and it looks like a very, very fresh book. You know, you're not super. I mean, maybe you can be diving in the Word every day, but you know, she was just really rooted in her faith. She always grew up and going to Bible camps and stuff like that, and you know, meeting her, it's definitely a highlight.
Yeah. See, you know, I'm a baby boomer, and so a lot of times, you know, we cast out ideas and what we think of the younger generation. You're what's good about the younger generation. And are you Z or X?
I think
don't
I'm the
even know.
last generation of that. No, I'm kidding. No,
But I think
social
a lot
media,
of people get down on the younger generation,
Mhm.
and you exemplify what's good about the younger
Yeah, I'm trying
generation.
to. I think as an older, it is easy to say that, like, oh, the younger generation, they don't know.
Right.
Like we walk to school, this and that,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
up and down
Rode a
hills.
horse.
Yeah. and you look back and you're like, I think if a kid turns out to be a great kid in this day and age, more props to him even more than you did. You know
Right.
why? Because of the pressure that NIL has, is the pressure that social media has, is like the pressure of, I don't know, just being like different and cool, like just standing out in social media. Like it's exhausting.
Right.
And I tell kids, like the moment that my daughter gets a smartphone, her childhood goes away. You know why? Because
Yeah.
she is lost in it. It's all she thinks about, and she's not thinking about being a kid.
Right.
And so like that's something I'm going to have to navigate in 10, 13 years. Like when does she get it? How do we navigate that? And you know, it's so easy for me to look at a kid and just be like, "Hey, knock it off," or like, "Don't live that." It's like, look what's around him. Like this is exhausting. Like,
Right.
you know, it's so, you know, having a balance with that, and you know, I am appreciative of growing up in the last era of no smartphones, and
Yeah.
you know, you look back, I'm pretty like I love nostalgia and like all that stuff and vintage stuff, and because people want to go back to that day and age where it's not a I don't know, it's just not like a big media type of age. That's why you give Michael Jordan a lot of credit.
Right.
He built his fame without social media, and then now
Right.
he's bigger because of it. But yeah, I mean, it's great.
So let's finish with hardship in your life. Tell us about a hardship.
Yeah, I would say the losses of a family member with Eli and the losses of wrestling have definitely been some big hardships in my life. What other people do to me or around me, I can control what I do, right? That's the biggest advice to people that have go through. What can you control? I can't, and that's what's tough about this whole hardship thing. And I talked to Terry about it, is like, when I lost wrestling matches, I was more mad at myself and upset than I was when I lost Eli. You know why? Because I can't control when someone dies.
Right.
But like, I feel like I'm in control when I go wrestle.
Right.
That's tough. Like, if you lose a business deal, you're mad. But like, because it's like that you're personally doing. But like, if someone else or something around you, that's okay.
Right.
But like, it's not. It's. And I'm not downplaying like losing Eli. It was super, and like, or just like family members that lose loved ones. but it kind of helps you deal with it, like, or helps you cope with it a little better. I'm not in control. But then I asked Terry, like, am I in control when I wrestle? Ultimately, because like God's determining the outcome, like he allows things to happen. I believe that. So like, how much in control am I? And that's where like, okay, when I wrestle, I can will things to happen, but it is in God's will. Like it's tough. Like it's a tough like faith thing. It's a tough trust thing. You doubt. It's okay to doubt, but are you fully trusting? And if you worry and all this stuff, like worrying causes doubt, then it's like you're really not trusting, like, you know, what God has in store.
But you'd say your faith got you through it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think, and then just like my toughness and like, yeah, my faith and toughness and just who I am as a person. I'm not gonna be a baby about it. You know, I'm not gonna be somebody that's super depressed and you know, crappy to hang around. You know, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be someone that comes in the room that people want to be around. That's what you got to be.
Anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish?
Just, you know, it's kind of funny. I stayed in one of your apartments when I got married. It was like my first, and then I moved into a home. But yeah, thanks for what you do for the community. You know, you build a lot of places for people that need it, and you know, I pass your places all the time. You know, and then too, just if you're someone in wrestling or in sports, you know, have a firm foundation to where your meaning is not in your sport or your business, because this is going to go like this. Like your sport and your business is going to fluctuate. You'll have bad years, you'll have good years. Who's driving your boat, right? Who's sailing you, and like, right, like what's your meaning in? That's what I'm going to say. And then who do you put your hand, like, who's your potter, right? Who's your mentor? Because you're getting molded right now, like no matter what age you are. And so that's what I'll say. I don't know everything, but the things that I've learned is like, you want to put your hands, you want to put yourself in the hands of a great potter.
Great.
So,
Alex, it's been great. It's been an honor to have you here.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing journey. I really appreciate you sharing all
now I'm
the
giving back.
things you've been through. So it's been great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.